And I was waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting and calling my agent saying, have you heard from them? And as it turns out, she really was looking for the Rory, Lorelai characters. Importantly, they were the leads of the show. So I was waiting and waiting, and then finally my agent called and said, you won't have to go to California to read for the studio. And that was like, oh. And he said, because they're offering you the job. And I went, oh, okay.
Welcome to Salon Talks. My name is Gabriella Faragine, and my guest today is Kelly Bishop. You know her as Emily Gilmore, matriarch of the Gilmore Girls, Marjorie Houseman in Dirty Dancing, and from her Tony Award-winning role in the original production of A Chorus Line. She's here to talk about her new memoir, The Third Gilmore Girl, which is out this month. Welcome, Kelly.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here.
So, at the recent Emmy Awards, there was a discussion about TV moms and how their role has evolved over time. I'm curious to learn how you would describe Emily Gilmore as a TV mom.
She's a different kind of TV mom from the ones I grew up with, Leave It to Beaver and things like that. So she's definitely a mother, but she's kind of a tough piece of work. Mm. And I imagine there are more mothers like that on television now, but she's rather unusual. And yet it's played off so beautifully with Lorelai and Rory and that nice relationship. So you'd have two different kinds of moms.
Right. And I was going to say, fans do love Emily for her honesty and for her strong sense of self, however you interpret that. What did you love most about her?
She's just fun to play. I mean, she's strong and doesn't worry about hurting people's feelings, really. And she's going to say what she means and try to get what she wants. And I'd love women like that. Mm-hmm.
The foreword of your memoir was written by Gilmore Girls creator Amy Sherman-Palladino. She saw many actresses read for the role of Emily, saying that she would basically know her when she walks in. And then you walked in, and she says you had this sort of regal air with a whiskey voice and just amazing comic timing. Can you talk about the experience of trying out for that role and how you felt once you'd actually gotten it?
Yeah, I really worked on that role. I always try as an actor. When I auditioned, I don't audition anymore. I refuse to do it. I've done it enough. At this point in my life, I say, they know what I look like. They know what I can do. If they want me, they can hire me. If not, just leave me alone. But I worked hard on it and always did, because I kind of believe as an actor, a major part of your job is to do the words as written, to present what the author wanted. And so I really worked on that role, and in a sense, almost knew it without the pages, which I also did at other auditions. I would walk in with the pages, but I wouldn't put them down, because I thought that would indicate that this is my final performance, if you see me. But if you see me holding pages, this is my work in progress. And so, but I was kind of giving my final performance, or what it was at that point.
Right.
So it made it a stronger presentation. And I went in, I did it, I thought I nailed it. I thought it was good.
She did too, I guess.
I guess so. And then I left. There were a couple of other women there for the same role. And then I went home, and you wait for a little bit, and I was waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting and calling my agent saying, have you heard from them? And as it turns out, she really was looking for the Rory, Lorelai characters. Importantly, they were the leads of the show. And so they were putting it off. What I didn't know is that she had already decided. And I thought, are they going to call me back out to California and have me read for the studio? And they didn't do that. And I'm kind of giving up hope here. I later asked Amy about it, probably a couple of years later. I said, how many other women, because I was always curious about who I was up against that I didn't know. And she said, we saw a lot of women, but she said, I told them that I'd already found you, and so just to stop bothering me with that. But I didn't know that.
Right.
So I was waiting and waiting, and then finally, as I think I put it in the book, that my agent called and said, you won't have to go to California to read for the studio. And that was like, oh. And he said, because they're offering you the job. And I went, oh, okay, cool. So that's how I got it. And I thought I did a really good audition. I just didn't know. You don't know.
Right, of course. Emily Gilmore as a character is, she kind of comes alive through the context of other characters, namely her relationship with her daughter Lorelai, granddaughter Rory, and husband Richard. What were your favorite things about working with that cast?
Oh, I mean, Lauren is truly like a daughter to me now. And we hit it off from day one. We just got along great, and I love her acting. I love her intelligence and her sense of humor. Alexis was much more shy, and partly because she was kind of a new actress. I mean, she wasn't used to the banter and the camaraderie and all of that. So I got to know her somewhat, but not a lot. And Edward Herrmann was a dream. He was, my age, theater actor, and it was just a joy to work with him. So it was
Well,
good.
you won respective Tony Awards on the same night in 1976.
I know. When I remember looking in the drawer at my house, and it was an old newspaper clipping, all yellowed. And I looked at it and I went, "Oh my God, we won the same night!"
Yeah.
And there we are standing there having our
And that photo's in your book now, right?
Now it's not quite that photo, but it's that same series there. And I thought, oh, who knew that 20 years later we would be married?
Well, you've shared that his death in 2014 had a really profound impact on you and Emily as a character, saying that his no longer being there really sort of changed the trajectory of Emily's path. Can you expand on that?
Well, the thing is, we had gone to Austin to do a big television theater, film thing, and the Gilmore Girls part was Alexis and myself and Lauren Graham and Amy, and we'd had a little question and answer period in the theater. And somebody asked about where these, because we didn't know we were ever going to do that new thing.
Right.
Where our lives would be now, and they each went to the thing. And when they got to me, because Ed had passed away by then, I said if he were with us, I would say probably very much the same place. So keep moving on doing the same thing. But now that he's gone, I said, this is a whole new world for Emily. This is completely different. And as it turns out, then when we did what they call the reboot, and they gave me the story, which actually, bottom line, was the best story in those 4 episodes, because there was someplace to go with it, something to explore. And so in a peculiar way, it made it really good for me, as much as I would not have chosen that.
Right, of course.
And it was, Amy's father had died a couple of years before, and I know that was hard on her, but I think she had observed her mother being a widow. Mm-hmm. So she had that information to put into Emily's character.
Right.
And I just went with it. I thought she had some wonderful stuff in there.
I'd like to turn to some of the personal moments that you share in your memoir. There are quite a few animals featured in the book, which I loved. You write about how you and your German Shepherd Venus were close companions while you toured for Irene, and you actually write how you tend to prefer the company of animals to humans, which is something I resonate with sometimes. Have animals always been a part of your life?
They have. When I was growing up, my first memories as a little girl there was a Pekingese that I used to tease relentlessly, and she used to bite me, and my mother, rightly so, yelled at me because I was bothering the dog. And then not long after that, we had a beautiful English setter named Pete, who apparently had come to the door. This is before my memories even, but literally one Christmas Eve came to the door or something like that. They later found the owner of that dog, but he apparently came to the house and saw how happy the dog was that he just said, "You take him." Mm-hmm. So we had that, and then I remember we adopted a pair of Siamese cats that had become homeless somehow. Mm-hmm. So we had cats, and that just kind of continued. When I went to New York as a dancer, 18 years old, there's no way, I had to leave the current dog behind. And it was when I was married in my first marriage, and I didn't really want to have a pet, or didn't want to have a dog, because I just thought it was hard on dogs and hard on you to have a dog in the city.
Of course.
And of course, he had to go off and get this puppy. My feeling being, he didn't buy it. He traded it for a rifle, apparently. I didn't even know he had a rifle. But
Craigslist before Craigslist.
But he was doing everything else. Why not? And he brought this puppy home. And I really said, I really, really don't want a dog. And then, of course, I started thinking about it, because he was a compulsive gambler and a bit of a philanderer. And I thought, I know what he was doing. He said, she'll stay home and take care of this puppy. and I can run around and do what I
Right.
want, which is exactly what I did. But that dog was magnificent. She
Yeah.
was great. And then I, picked up a couple of cats in Vegas prior to that. So I've always had animals around me.
Yeah, and we see them in some of the photos as well. I can't help but think of Princess, the Jack Russell Terrier from season 5, who sort of helps Emily repair her relationship with her husband Richard, in line with your discussion of animals as well.
Yeah. I don't even really remember much about that. Did I?
That's okay.
Yeah, I don't.
Yeah, it's from season 5, a small little dog that's featured, but
I love it. I'm glad. I like to see animals get work.
you write so beautifully of your relationship with your second husband, Lee Leonard, and I love that photo of him in your kitchen in your New York City apartment together that's in the book. You say that post his passing that you're looking for, quote, serenity, and you've spoken openly about your mental health journey and working with a cognitive behavioralist. What's been the biggest benefit of therapy for you?
Well, I'd liked it before when I gave myself the gift in a chorus line because I was finally making money on a regular basis, and I wanted to explore a little bit more about myself, mainly because I kept finding myself in a relationship where I would hit the 3-year mark and want to be out of there. I'm bored. And I thought, no, this is a pattern. So we got to break this pattern. So, and since I had the money and my dearest friend was seeing this therapist, and I saw her improvement, I thought, okay, I'll go to him. And it was several sessions in before he explained to me that he was a strict Freudian, which meant I was supposed to come 3 times a week for 5 years. Wasn't part of my plan. And of course, I never went 3 times a week. I went twice a week for quite a while and grew a lot and learned a lot. And I think it always helps an actor to explore psychology because that's where we go when we're trying to find a character.
Right.
And I benefited so much from that and felt that actually I probably wouldn't have gotten together with Lee if I hadn't done that because he was a pretty powerful man. And I think I would have been intimidated by him. So I had changed that much. And then after he passed, and I expected it, horrified by it, but expected it. And then I was starting to look for, trying to find the new me is what it was. And that's, I'm saying, peace of mind, serenity, focus. I'm not looking for happy, I don't want love. And somebody told me about a therapist, a cognitive behavioralist that she was going to, who had helped her. So I said, see if there's, your doctor has, they aren't really doctors, but knows anyone out in my area where I live. And he did, and recommended this woman whom I just have such a good time with. And it's not, she even explained to me, she said, it's not psychoanalysis. I'm going to talk to you. I'm not going to make you just sit there and talk to me. So there's a lot of exchange going on. She has suggestions. And so she's very comfortable. If she weren't my therapist, I think I'd want her to be my friend.
I think that's a great relationship to have with a therapist. And
yeah.
regarding Lee, you observe in your memoir that you both were sort of on the same page about, not wanting to have children. And Emily and Lorelai do have a pretty fraught relationship. So I was wondering did playing an iconic TV mom ever make you think differently about motherhood in general?
It didn't. I had made that decision when I was a child for some reason. I had very sophisticated thoughts when I was a child. And I did give myself permission. I mean, more it was because I wanted a career. I wanted to dance. I wanted freedom. And I knew the responsibility of having a child,
right.
And that a child becomes priority, as should. And I wasn't ready for that. But I gave myself permission to change my mind. And I figured, but you have to do it by the time you're 35. Realizing in those days we didn't have a lot of the testing we have, right. Where you find out if the fetus is healthy and everything. And I thought 35 seemed to change things. So that's the deal. And I got, around that age, and of course I had that unfortunate abortion. And still knew I did not want to have children. And the odd thing is that when Lee and I were on our very first date, and it was just dinner, we had a very long discussion about the fact that he didn't want to have children.
Right.
At which he explained to me, maybe, I don't know if it was that night or later, that he had dated and been together with several women who he was really fond of. I mean, that he could be quite madly in love with, but they wanted to have a family. And he knew he wasn't built for that. I mean, he does have a daughter whom he loves and who's, lives with me now. But that was not his plan. So that was a great relief to me. Great relief. I didn't have to worry about that. To the point where, like a year after we were married, I went ahead and had tubal ligation because he didn't want kids, I didn't want kids.
Yeah.
Let's just fix it.
Right.
You know.
So I want to turn to your career momentarily. And your career began notably on Broadway as a dancer. You originated the role of Sheila in a chorus line. What was it like transitioning from dancing to acting?
It's exactly what I wanted to do. The last few years of my chorus life, I was trying to figure out how to maneuver myself into principal roles. They would naturally have to be in musicals because I was a musical performer, but I'm not a singer. And I knew that that was going to be a little tricky. If you want a principal role in a musical, you should be able to sing.
Right.
I can sing. I just am not a singer. And things just evolved. If you find the right role, you can, it's more of a character role. And I was sort of that was starting to happen for me, but then we did that tape session that turned into a chorus line, and it was a perfect situation because to me it was a play with music. So I was acting in it. That was my job, and the nice thing was I knew how to dance, and I was a very good dancer, so that satisfied that part of my character. And it just opened the door because the show was, even if I hadn't won the Tony Award, that show was huge. You have no idea. It took over the world. It was the most amazing thing in the world. And it even saved New York in my mind because New York was really in dire straits, talking about bankruptcy.
Right.
So the spirit of New York was so depressed. And somehow that show, I don't think it was only that show, but we were involved in it, so that's our point of view. It just kind of revived things and stuff started happening and coming back. And for all of us who were in that show, it was so beneficial.
That's such a beautiful sentiment. You also starred in Dirty Dancing as Baby's mother, Marjorie, and you say that working on the last number in that movie, you say this in the book, I've had the time of my life, sort of encapsulated the whole experience of being a part of that film, and that you still get chills from those unforgettable memories. And I was wondering, what are the memories that come to mind when you hear that song?
Well, it's always that last scene, which we shot forever and ever and ever, and I was perfectly happy to sit there for another 2 weeks and shoot it. But Jerry Orbach was just a remarkable man and a wonderful actor, but very, very bright. And he sort of hung around with me, and then I think I mentioned it in the book, but then I started realizing he would take off for a week, and I was there in either Virginia or North Carolina, and thought, why am I still here? I don't do any scenes without him. So I started leaving and going home the same week he did, and of course, in the book that I started thinking, people think there's something funny going on between us, which there wasn't. But even there's a golf scene in Dirty Dancing, and the golf club there was just so happy to have us that I didn't have my clubs with me, and he didn't have his, and so they let us come on the course, and they gave us a cart, and they loaned us clubs, and we didn't have to pay for anything, and we got to play golf, and that was great fun. There were just so many nice people involved, and finally getting to know the crew, and I really enjoyed the crew. And I always have appreciated them, but I just never got to know them when I was just popping in and out doing a role. So it was just a good feeling.
Yeah. As I mentioned before, I really, really loved the inclusion of all the photographs in the Third Gilmore Girl. You look so glamorous in them, especially those dancing photos in your leotard. But I really especially liked the black and white contact sheet one where you have that really glamorous updo and you're wearing that long black dress. What was it like to take a trip back down memory lane as you sort of compiled all those photos for the book?
Well, that was the fun of it. And what I ended up doing, because I knew I wanted a lot of photographs, but I didn't know what was really appropriate. I knew there were certain ones I absolutely wanted in there. So I managed to, with the help of my publisher, find a photo archivist, and I hired her. She came over to my house and went through all the stuff that I have, took a lot of stuff with her. And then I found out I had to pay royalties to a lot of people, like the New York Public Library, who had like a picture of me, and the Martha Swope estate. How come people all have my picture? That even happened with the lyrics in the book of At the Ballet. Oh. Somebody else owns those lyrics. I had to pay royalties, and I'm going, wait a minute, that's my story. Those are my words, and I have to pay you, but I wanted to put them in the book because I thought they blended nicely with the story,
And
with
they
the
did.
real story, so that you could understand where that came from. So, yeah, the pictures, I would have put more in if I could, but I was happy with what she selected and agreed to it, so that's how we left it.
That's great. Well, Kelly, those are all the questions I have for you today. It's been so wonderful to have you on the show. I'm so appreciative that I got the chance to meet you, and you can read Kelly's book, The Third Gilmore Girl, which is out now.
Thank you for watching Salon Talks. Be sure to subscribe as we feature some of your favorite artists, authors, and more. And while you're here, you might as well watch another video by clicking right here.